Welcome to Gorilla Sports Off Court. I am your host for today, Liv Moods, and we will be joined by Brandon Cristal in just a bit. We're presented by Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. So head to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you save money today.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. I am Liv Moods. That is Brandon Cristal, and we are going to be discussing today the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, if you guys watched the Boston Celtics matchup, it was a close one. The Nuggets, I think, managed to get it as close as three. Yeah, 2 or 3 points. The lead at one point was 20. You got to see a very hot version of Jamal Murray in the second half. There were some positive things to take away from that game, but mostly negative, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things where close is just not good enough. You know, to lose by 7 points against the Celtics for some teams is a flex. For this Denver Nuggets team, it should not be a flex because they're way too good to be in this position. So BK, immediate reactions. Oh my gosh, there's somebody at my home. Immediate reactions that you have to maybe what you saw against the Celtics, what you saw against the Bucks. And
well, just the road trip. Is it
Yeah.
because as you were watching the game yesterday, Mike Breen at one point called it a successful road trip because they were 2-1 coming into it.
Mhm.
You'd won at Indy. I was at that game in person. Then you lose a tough one to the Bucks, but bounce back and beat an upstart Detroit team that has one of the best young players in Cade Cunningham on the second night of the back-to-back, where they continue to really excel. So I guess looking ahead to next weekend,
Yeah.
it's really good for next
Oof.
Monday, a week from tonight. Second game against OKC, you're gonna like better than the
Both
first,
in
maybe.
OKC. Yeah.
But that they went on the road. They're
Oh
still,
my
I believe, a game under 500 against teams over 500, if I'm not mistaken. I need to
Yeah.
double check that number, but they were 2 games under 500 against teams over 500 going in, or 1 game. They were either way, so it shouldn't have changed. Either way, though, we know they play tough against the Celtics. They did
Yep.
here. They were undermanned. They beat them there last year. They won twice against them last year. The Celtics kind of, it seems like it did force them to take more threes. I saw your comment during the game. But there aren't any moral victories, especially at this time of the year. I guess it is better than getting blown out. If
For
you
sure.
lose by 30.
For sure. And that's kind of what it looked like in the
It was
first half.
trending that
It was
way.
trending that direction. So I was very pleased to see them make
Well,
it a little bit of a closer game.
What was the thing that frustrated you most about the game? Because there are obviously certain things you can pick apart, but just the overall thing that you're like, God, they need to do this better, or it's not going to matter in April. Because I still don't think there's that many teams in the West that can win the West, although the Lakers are starting to make us consider about adding them to.
Yeah.
I mean, no Austin Reeves is going to hurt them, so we'll see how long he's actually out. But when you've got a scenario that never takes LeBron James,
Right.
one of the 2 or 3 best players of all time, and Luka Doncic, one of the 2 or 3 best players out there right now, 3 or 4 best players out there right now, there's never a scenario where one of them isn't on the court,
Right.
and they're on the court together for probably 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be a tough out. I don't know if they can play defense like this all year. But what was your biggest takeaway from the game that bothered you, I guess, or what was the thing that?
I think my biggest bother is probably MPJ right now. I think there's just he is not the same player that he was in 2023 when this team won a championship. And I think my frustration is kind of a umbrella. I think it's like a very wide range of frustrations, but they all seem to fall under the same umbrella, which is I think this Nuggets team has got to let go of 2023 a little bit and make some business decisions in order to make this team better. Obviously, there was an opportunity to trade MPJ for some depth or a 3-and-D guy. You know, there were conversations that were being entertained for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they didn't end up making any moves, which is fine. But what we're seeing from Michael Porter Jr. is just very timid and
Certainly
soft
inconsistent.
basketball.
It's definitely inconsistent, but
Very.
I just pulled up his numbers for the last 5 games. So going back to the loss against the Lakers,
Yep.
13 and 8 boards. Then he comes back on Monday night in Indy, 19 points, 11 boards, where he makes his first 3, and you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those nights. Then he missed every 3 he took just about after that, but was getting to the rack and was active. Then they go to Milwaukee, and he's almost non-existent there, 12 points. He did have 10 boards. 28, he explodes, as well as 9 boards in Detroit. And then yesterday, just 10 points to go with 5 rebounds.
And again, I think the trend is what we're seeing with Michael Porter Jr. is against good contending teams, he's absent. That's almost when you need him the most.
Yeah,
And
scoring
so
28 against Detroit, but not scoring 19 against the Celtics, scoring 10 against the
Right.
Celtics. If he scores 19
So-
yesterday, they win by 7.
yeah, so that's my frustration. I think that there's obviously in that game you could argue that the officiating was kind of crazy and there were moments where the Nuggets weren't getting the calls that they deserved. The three-point shooting, I do think the Celtics were able to force the Nuggets to be uncomfortable because the threes are not really their game this year. Coach Malone has stated that this is not a roster that's built for volume three-point shooting. While I think they have the talent for that, they haven't tapped into that enough. They've kind of abandoned that mindset. And so I think the overall frustration that I wanted to talk to you about today is it feels like right now the Nuggets have a very antiquated game plan. It feels like they're holding way too tightly onto 2023 in terms of their roster and who they're building the team around. But also, I understand Coach Malone not wanting to live and die by the three. We know that the Denver Nuggets have been very successful in points in the paint. You've got CB, who's been exceptional in transition. So you don't necessarily need to live and die by the three. However, every other team is. They're making it their focus. They're making it their priority, and they're really good at it. And so when you couple the Nuggets not wanting to play their offense that way with the fact that they can't defend teams that play that way, it's impossible to win these games.
The defense is still going to be the frustrating part.
Of course.
And the part that in theory can be fixed. I'm kind of with you that they do have maybe better shooters than you think. And Aaron Gordon, who didn't play yesterday, but he's got his best
good for some threes.
He's got his best 3-point
Yeah.
shooting year of his career right now,
Yeah.
over 40%. But without question, when you look at Russell Westbrook and he hits an open three, you're always thinking, man, I hope this goes in. But you're like, that's going in. Even Christian Brown, who sometimes passes up ones you think he's going to take.
Yeah.
Other than when it's leaving Jamal Murray, still MPJ, and Julian Strawther's hands, if Peyton Watson's in there, you're not like, oh, this is going in, Aaron Gordon. And when you have Nikola Jokic, you have not only the best passer for a center, but the best player in the league who can score. If anyone's going to cover him one-on-one, doesn't matter if it's Rudy Gobert. He eats Rudy Gobert up.
Yeah.
I know Wemby gives him some challenges, but Wemby's not playing against him anytime soon. But otherwise, you're not worried about a single person. And if you are going to double him, well, then it's going to definitely leave somebody open. So if you had better threes around him, I'm not saying you don't want good spacing and being able to find lanes to the basket, but if you had just better shooters, if you had the guys that Cleveland has, if you swapped him with Evan Mobley, then
look at the Celtics. We were just talking before the
Right.
show. Peyton Pritchard, Derek White. I mean, any of those guys on the Celtics have so many players that are capable of being clutch. I just don't feel like the Nuggets have that.
Yeah, you didn't even bring up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who
Right. Sorry, those are the kind of obvious ones.
The
Yeah.
All NBA player and the guy who was
Sorry, guys.
MVP of the MVP of the finals. But that's sort of the point. And when Kristaps Porzingis is healthy,
Yeah.
that's another. Yeah, he's 7'3", but he can knock down a wide open three as well. And so they obviously run great offense and they score a lot of points.
Yep.
And you've got the best player in the world making everybody around him better. But even when he's on the court with Zeke Naji, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Zeke might knock down a three, and he's done it a few times, but no one's looking at Zeke as a pure 3-point shooter. He doesn't shoot the way Michael Porter does. So if you're not going to run your offense to really feature those guys shooting threes, then you're going to be limited and you're going to lose that gunfight to teams with better shooters every time you play them.
Well, and I guess too, some of my frustration in terms of it feeling like the Nuggets have a very outdated game plan here is, let's say you're not the best, perimeter defense. We know that is just a struggle of this Denver Nuggets team defense as a whole. We also know that teams defensively are going to prioritize locking up Nikola Jokic and really crowding the paint, if you will, forcing some of that 3-point shooting that we saw against the Celtics. But the other part of that for me is like, okay, that's one issue. We also have an outdated approach in terms of the game is getting very physical. And the Nuggets, to me, are playing very soft.
Well, then there's kind of an easy answer, and I don't know why we haven't talked to Michael Malone about this more. Maybe we will this week. But Aaron Gordon solves both of those problems a lot, as does Russell Westbrook. Westbrook will get all over you, play really in-your-face defense, constantly flying around. And I think Peyton Watson has some of that in him too. So Peyton's been hurt. And AG's been hurt kind of all year, and including yesterday, which may have just been a rest day and all that. But Aaron Gordon kind of solves two problems in that he makes you tougher and he can score a bunch of different ways but he makes you tougher and he plays better defense.
Yep.
So just in general, your defense is going to be better. Not just can he cover 1 to 5, but he can really play defense and he plays smart defense, and he and Joker know each other and they know how to pick up for each other and all of that. So the obvious of taking him off the court means, okay, you're having to now go one more spot down the bench, but also when he's out there, it's going to calm things down.
Yeah.
And not having Aaron Gordon for basically half the season has clearly been a
It
factor.
sucks. Yeah.
So if he's healthy in the playoffs, that also probably changes the way we're talking about their defense.
Well, and I think the worry for me there is the lack of
Cohesion,
continuity that they're able to build right now, because the starting 5 looks different every week. And again, a lot of that's out of their control. You know, they've dealt with injuries. Jamal early with a concussion, Russell Westbrook with a hamstring, Peyton Watson, Aaron Gordon. There's been a lot of that. However, I think the follow-up that I have to say about the fact that, yes, a lot of these things are out of their control. They cannot help that Aaron Gordon has been battling injury. You know, we see teams go through this all the time. I think then where my frustration comes into play with Coach Malone is the strategy behind rotations doesn't always make sense to me. It doesn't always feel like, you know, we've watched Aaron Gordon be out for quite a few games. We watched Russell Westbrook, Peyton Watson all miss a lot of games. And in those games, we got to see valuable minutes played by Jalen Pickett and Zeke Naji. I think there's a world where we have a conversation about Zeke Naji, of the players available, is playing the best defense right now. And he's not playing nearly enough if defense is your problem. Why aren't you playing him more? Jalen Pickett, defensive player of the game against the Suns earlier this season. We know he's good for some clutch threes. Why don't we see those guys more? So that's where I kind of question Coach Malone's strategy behind his rotations. And you know you're going to be without Aaron Gordon. You know, Russell Westbrook has been out for some time and he's now back. And, you know, there's going to be a little bit of a grace period we have to allow for Russ to get back into it with this team. But knowing that you've seen valuable minutes from these guys and they've proven themselves, you put them in a tough spot and they proved themselves. Why not utilize what you have more in that second unit?
And Zeke could have been defensive player of the game last Monday in Indy. Mike Malone said that post game when he gave it to Joker. And I even asked Zeke, hey, were you thinking I might be defensive player of the game? He's like, no, not really. But then as he starts to do it, I'm like, oh, maybe this is going to be me. Or, you know, it was kind of it. But certainly Joker is a better defender than people give him credit for. But I agree with you about both those guys. I guess, just based on the rotation. And when Julian Strawther gets banged up, and you hope that his leg's okay.
Yes.
I was surprised that they went Jalen Pickett right there and didn't just use one of the other guards that wasn't in. But I understand. Jalen's earned those minutes. Even if it's not a lot of minutes, he's earned the right to be on the floor. And that's credit to him, because he didn't look great in Summer League. And I know it's Summer League, but Trey Alexander looked awesome. You're like, he's like, Jalen Pickett should be the one on the two-way, and that Trey Alexander should be up here with how well he was playing again at Summer League. But Pickett was a really good player at Pitt. He's kind of got an old school game in that, you know, he doesn't mind starting on the block, which is weird for a point guard. Not a great shooter, but he'll knock down a shot. And he's not overly athletic, so he's not attacking the rim the way Jamal does, and certainly the way Russ has his whole career. But the flip side of what you said, though, as far as the continuity with the offense, is it will allow them, when they get in the playoffs, if they're healthy, to have more trust in everybody. And know that no matter what the situation is, foul trouble, an ankle roll, whatever, we've mixed and matched. We've used this lineup before.
Right. We've seen this because it does feel like we've seen every variation of this starting 5 so far this year. Like, we've seen games without Jokic. We've seen games without Jamal. We've seen games without Aaron Gordon, MPJ. I mean, like
CB's been, I guess, the only
CB's kind of been the most consistent, but even he got swapped out for Russell Westbrook there for a little bit. So there's been a lot of inconsistencies in this starting lineup, which is just how you adapt to injuries and everything else that's been thrown this team's way. But I think I had talked about Russ over CB as a starter. I feel like I'm going to backtrack on that a little bit.
I think everybody is.
Yeah, I'm going to backtrack on that a little bit. Still a huge Russ fan. I still think Russ adds a lot of value to this team. But it feels like post-injury for him, he's doing a lot more, but not in a good way. He's doing too much.
I will say there's times where you think he's going to shoot it, and you're like, oh, here we go. And he's passed it up to try to get the ball.
Yeah.
And maybe almost to his detriment there, too. Not that he's needing to shoot that, but like he's so quick to get the ball back to Joker. CB, I think, falls victim to that too, to some degree, other than you're giving the ball to the best player in the world. So just keep running your offense. And as long as you're not taking a terrible shot, then you're going to be okay. The one thing that I'm worried about with Russ, I have to give my buddy Tim credit for this, who's just my gambling buddy in LA
Mhm.
and a Philly fan, Sixers fan. But his observation about Russ is, I think, pretty accurate as far as why Russ hasn't been dominant in the playoffs.
Mhm.
They went to the finals when they were all young with KD and James Harden. Is Russ's biggest attribute is how hard he plays all the time.
Mhm.
But in playoff games, everybody plays hard from the jump.
Mhm.
So it minimizes his intensity. Now, he's still a great athlete, super smart, and a Hall of Fame kind of player. We know he's not going to knock down as many open threes as he gets. And in fact, I got to give Brett Kane credit for this from altitude. I heard this a few months ago. He goes, Russell Westbrook might be the worst high volume 3-point shooter in the history of the NBA. And you look in the numbers he's like 14th or 18th all time in threes attempted, but he shoots 30%.
Mhm.
So I think him not starting is actually going to be better for how you're going to approach things in the playoffs. And then I think Malone, like he always does, is going to have to go by feel as far as how he finishes.
Well, that's the part maybe where I don't have a ton of trust with the feeling. That's where I'm a little worried because it's like I don't know. It just feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect. And you made a great point earlier in the season about like, I asked, did Malone lose the locker room? And you're like, not, we don't know if he ever really had it. There just seems to be a disconnect this year. And I'm not sure if it's a fixable issue at this point in the season.
That
or
may
if
be we're
it's-
losing guys. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that may be we're losing guys like KCP and Jeff Green hurt you. Because
Yeah.
they can be extensions of the coach.
Yeah.
And so, and Bruce Brown too. But I think there might be something to that.
Of course. I think we talked about that also earlier in the season about how KCP was potentially an accountability coach. He was a veteran. He had been a part of different teams and different cultures, and he knew probably how to speak to players to get them to react and respond. So when you lose him, you don't just lose 3-and-D, but you also lose some accountability as well as, like you said, an extension of the coach. The coaching definitely is a bit confusing right now in terms of just the rotation and having the strategy around that. I want to entertain the idea with you about what trading Michael Porter Jr. in the offseason would look like. What is the likelihood, in your opinion? We were just talking ahead of the show that Kevin Durant in Denver could be something special. The Suns, we know, struggling. They've been kind of a disappointment in a lot of different ways. So what is your picture perfect trade for Michael Porter Jr.? Because at this point, does he bring value to this team anymore? It doesn't feel like he is right now.
Well, I think, does he bring the consistency in for a guy that's making max money or whatever, however
Right.
you quantify that, but making a lot of money, third highest paid player? He's almost never your third best player in big games. He's been the second best player actually in a handful of games, including maybe Monday in Indy, where he had 19 and 11, although
Mhm.
Zeke Naji played really well there too. And every starter had 15 points or more. So it's hard to quantify when you're playing that well and you have 39 assists. But Kevin Durant is interesting to me. You just can't dump him to dump him, though. And that's why we didn't want to see the trade at the trade deadline if it didn't make sense. Brandon Ingram was at least interesting, although he was hurt and he's a free agent. That may actually end up helping you. But if you're going to give up an asset, what are you getting back? If Kevin Durant's part of the Michael Porter, or the only piece of the Michael Porter Jr. trade, you're going to need to offer more, which is probably going to include draft picks, as well as a couple other players like Christian Brown, like Julian Strawther, like Jalen Pickett. Guys like that are going to end up in the trade. Maybe it's Peyton Watson, but you're getting back maybe the best pure scorer in the history of the NBA. A guy that can just score as easily as anyone we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an idea of what it might look like, go watch that Court of Gold show on Netflix and just see how easy Kevin Durant scores in the Olympics when he has other really good players around him. And Devin Booker's a really good player, but Devin Booker needs to get a lot of shots.
Mm-hmm.
And Bradley Beal isn't great off the ball either. And so it's just not a good mix. Like, that's at least when he played with Harden, Russell Westbrook. Kevin Durant doesn't need the ball.
Mm-hmm.
They run plays for him and they get him the ball.
Right.
But he didn't need to bring it up the court. He's going to get into the offense. So if it's Michael Porter Jr. for Kevin Durant, Michael Porter Jr. and others for Kevin Durant, I'm all about it. But Michael Porter Jr., just to trade him doesn't, like for draft picks or whatever,
Right.
Doesn't feel like that's going to help you in the short term unless it's a high draft pick. It's going to come in and play. And why would you do that when you've got a young player coming in versus a guy with his injury history and inconsistency?
Right. Well, and he's not getting any younger. I mean, not that it really looks that way.
No, but
he can still play at a very high level.
He's what,
but
27? And he talked about this earlier too, where he's like, I'm the bridge guy. We got a bunch of young guys and a handful of old guys, and I'm the one that's kind of in between because he is more of a vet than a young player.
Mm-hmm. No, I was talking about Kevin Durant. Not getting any younger, but still playing at a very high level.
Kevin Durant, because of how is he going to keep attacking the basket? And I think he's done that less. But you see when he's open at 7 feet, and he's 7 feet. I don't care what he's listed at. He's 7 feet tall. Shot never gets blocked, and it goes in more than it doesn't. He's awesome. You don't have to convince me on Kevin Durant. It's can you put together a package that's attractive enough to the Suns?
Well, and will the Nuggets let go of MPJ? It feels like they are so attached to the year 2023 for good reason. It was a great year to be a Denver Nuggets fan that year. However, the game evolves, and it feels like the Nuggets are not jumping on board with all of the different evolutions, whether it be living and dying by the three, playing more physical, treating it like a business, and detaching yourself from somebody that did a lot for you at one time but is not doing a lot for you right now. I mean, what are the goals that the Denver Nuggets have? Is it to just be above 500 and keep Nikola Jokic happy, or is it to win another championship?
I think it's won a lot more championships.
I mean, hello. So in my opinion, you got to be a little bit more strategic, not just in games for 4 quarters, but also in the off season when you're preparing for the next season. And it doesn't feel like they prioritize that enough.
They obviously were hoping Deron Holmes would come in.
Of course.
And that's why they make that move and grab him draft night. It's unfortunately he tears his Achilles in his first summer league game. They didn't have a lot of room, and they don't have a lot of room, but we don't see Josh around much. I will see him at the NFL owners meetings. And so my hope is to ask him, and I got to look through the economics. I don't want to come uninformed. But if you can make a move, and adding a Kevin Durant probably does affect like the various aprons. And I know that that's tens of millions of dollars, and it's easy for us to spend other people's money. But the one thing you cannot buy is a championship. You can just give yourself the best chance to try to win it. So isn't it worth going into that second or even third apron like the Warriors did and got their 4th championship by doing it, to exhaust all opportunities while you still have Joker in his prime? And yes, it's going to cost them more money, but it will get them more rings and more trophies and all of that. I would think that the answer would be yes. But again, it's easy for me to spend other people's money.
Yeah. Well, I just think, at this point in time, I'm big on what have you done for me lately? I've always been that way. I was that way with Jamal as well when we paid him a lot of money. And even Jamal in this last game, you and I were talking ahead of the show that he had a really great second half, but where was that energy in the first half? Why did it take being down by 20 points before Jamal Murray had that look in his eyes and locked in and gave us what we know he can do on any given night? So there is a disconnect somewhere where these players are playing like they don't care whether they win or lose. That is the feeling that I get when I watch the Nuggets. It's that they don't have that intensity and that hunger to win basketball games until it's too late and it's the 4th quarter and there's 4 minutes left and you're like, where was this in the first quarter? It just feels like maybe there's the strategy in their minds of our biggest problem last season was how tired we were by the end of the year and when the playoffs began. So maybe there's this we're pacing ourselves mentality, because we did hear Coach Malone be very, very transparent about seeding. Don't get comfortable with your seed in the Western Conference, because any play-in team can give you a run for your money when it comes to the West. I mean, we know the talent that is in this conference. We know that it's going to be a bloodbath, and that every week the Western Conference looks different outside of OKC being in the one spot right now. But I think maybe there's a world where the Nuggets don't care what seed they are. As long as they make the playoffs, they feel confident in what they can do once they're there.
I think that's true, but there's a difference between being a 2nd or 3rd seed, and technically they're 3rd right now, but both then the Lakers have the same record and are 10.5 games back of OKC. 2nd or 3rd matters a lot more than you think, because if not, if you're the 4 seed, you're definitely playing OKC.
Yeah.
Or if you're 4 or 5,
yeah,
you're definitely playing OKC in round 2. And I think you want to push off seeing them until as late as possible. Not that you're not going to have to go through them, but you'd rather get there by playing the Clippers in round 1 as a 2-7 matchup, and then playing the Lakers in round 2 as the 2-3, versus in round 2 going to OKC for what could be 7 games or less, but you're the road team no matter what. So I think that he's saying that, but still keeping an eye on it. And that's also still knowing that they're not going to get to the 1 seed. Like the math there's not enough games left, and the Thunder aren't going to lose enough. Even if they beat them twice, they're still 8 games behind them next week when they win those games, if nothing happened different record-wise in terms of winning and losing between now and then.
Right.
But he does realize that keeping his vets healthier and giving them more of a relief throughout games and breaks up until the end of the season is going to matter. But I absolutely think they know in the back of their mind they want to be a 2 or a 3 seed and not the 4 seed or lower. or not 4 or 5.
Which I think they're in a position where they kind of can do a little bit of coasting and still stay at the 2 or 3 seed. And so, again, maybe there's a world where some of this is strategic. I hate to even go there because, in my opinion, every game matters, and I want to see the hustle from start to finish. I don't want it to be you pick and choose when you play hard and when you play tough. I don't like that. But maybe there's a world where they know last season, I think there were a lot of people that shared the feeling that had the Denver Nuggets been in the finals, it would have been a much more competitive matchup against the Celtics than what we saw with Dallas. So even not being able to get through the Timberwolves, as interesting as that is in a game 7 that they lose, I do feel like a lot of people still felt like the Nuggets could have been competitive way past where they were eliminated. And
Well, a lot of
so
people thought they beat Dallas in that series. I did. The standings, I just pulled them up again. I
Yeah.
don't know if you have them handy. So they're tied with
the Lakers.
the Lakers right now.
Yeah.
But they're only a half game ahead of Memphis, and they're only a game and a half ahead of Houston. So if you're not going to finish 2 or 3, you kind of want to be 6 or 7 because then you run into the same thing. So you don't want to be 4 or 5, and they're close enough there that, yeah, they drop a few. They could fall behind all those teams, especially because they're still playing Houston and Memphis, and they play the Lakers twice more. So they can control a lot of this narrative, but you just don't want to be 4, I think, essentially 4 or 5. You want to be 2, 3, 6, or 7.
But I guess,
Although you don't want to be 7 because you got to play in the playing game. You want to be 2, 3, or 6.
Which that just sounds like a little too much uncertainty
It's a lot
for
of
me.
just win enough games to finish 2 or 3 and you'll be fine.
Or just win all of them.
Well, you win all of them and you'll also be fine.
Right.
Yeah. You win every game from now
I don't know.
until
I really do think
no,
there's
mark
a
it down.
strategy
Mark it
to
down.
this.
If they win every game through the rest of the regular season, Jason, you can save this tape, and then they win every game in the playoffs, 16 wins there, they will be NBA champions. So that's all it takes is win every game that you have left. What is that? They're down to 22 or something like that.
Yeah.
Win those final 22, 16 playoff games, go undefeated in the playoffs, which has never happened. I think the best is like 16-2 in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, go 16-0, and that's it. They're champions. Mark it down.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that's a great hot take.
Well, I'm glad you agree, because if you disagreed, then we have a much harder
If I disagree, that's the hot take.
How do I convince you that if they win every game from here until the end of the season?
If I disagree, that's where the hot take lies.
Yeah.
I do think that, even when you guys are in the post-game presser room and you ask Coach Malone how he feels about where they're seated, he doesn't care. He does not care. And again, his reasoning behind that is any team that you could face in the playoffs out west is going to give you trouble. So if you think, oh, we're the 1 seed, or oh, we're the 2 seed, we're good, you're probably not, because that is where a lot of teams get into trouble. I really could see OKC losing early because they are young and they have that mindset. They have that, we're in the 1 seed. They've been riding this high. They've got all this adrenaline. They're feeling really good and confident. And then they meet a team in the West that is just playing tougher and harder. And I don't know. I could definitely see a world where OKC gets upset relatively early in the playoffs.
Well, because Golden State and Minnesota are jockeying for 7 and 8. And then
I have Golden State winning the West as a.
Well, then you have Sacramento and Dallas, and Phoenix can still. I mean, they've obviously put like garbage of late.
As a little sprinkle, like hot take ticket, I did sprinkle on Golden State to win the West because it genuinely would not surprise me.
Well, and to be fair, they're all tied. These are tiebreakers, but the Clippers, Golden State, and Minnesota are all 17 games back, which and 5 behind Houston. So you get them in 6, 7, 8. But Sacramento's only half game back of that group. And then Dallas is tied with Sacramento. So those 2 teams. So really teams 6 through 10 are the same.
Right.
I am not worried about the Kings, although adding Zach LaVine and moving on from De'Aaron Fox is interesting because he and DeMar DeRozan really like each other and play well. Plus Sabonis obviously is a handful. But I wouldn't want any part of the Warriors if they're healthy. With Steph and Jimmy Butler, when we know
we know what playoff Jimmy looks like. I mean, hello. I think when they first got Jimmy, they were on a 5-1 win streak with him. And of course, I think when you have a player like Steph Curry, any team that you got Steph Curry on, you're good for a championship, right? I mean, we know the impact that he has.
Making 12 threes in games.
But then you add Jimmy Butler to the mix, who also elevates himself significantly in the playoffs. And we saw the hot start that the Warriors were on to begin the season. It was looking like, whoa, they're going to be a force. Then they kind of fell off. Then they make this business decision trade, and I think they're setting themselves up to be kind of a sleeper potentially, where maybe it's kind of like the Eagles, where, again, very different because the Eagles, like, whatever. But we didn't talk a ton about the Eagles. We knew they were talented.
No,
We
we're
knew
talking
they
a lot about
had
the Lions.
right. And so maybe there's a world where we're talking about OKC and Memphis and the Lakers and the Nuggets and whatever, but then Golden State's just as talented, kind of coasting a little bit, but we know what they can deliver when the games matter the most. At the end of the day, seeding does matter, yes, to a certain extent, but I also view the playoffs as a clean effing slate because
Yeah, but the thing that matters
depending
is have
obviously
you
on the
been there?
matchups.
No, matchups for sure, but have you
Yes,
been
have you
there?
been there?
Jimmy Butler's carried a team to the finals.
Yep. Steph Curry.
Draymond Green, and then Steph Curry showed us in the Olympics and it shows. I mean, again, he had 12 threes the other night. You want no part of a close game with the ball in Steph Curry's hand if you're the opponent. I don't care whether you're OKC, Denver, you name it, Lakers. If Steph Curry has the ball in his hands and it's within striking distance, he's going to find a way to get a good look and get the ball in the basket more times than not. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know if you want anything to do with the Warriors at all.
I don't. And that's my hot take, little sports betting hot take for you is the Warriors coming out of the West. I took it at plus 1,600, I think. I'm not sure where it sits now.
What are your Nuggets to come out of the West? Have their odds changed at all with these?
Their odds
matchups?
have been up and down and so inconsistent.
I think they were still fifth the other day, like in terms of to win it all.
To win it all, yeah. I think that the last I had checked, the Nuggets were plus 1,300 to win it all. And they were behind the Celtics, OKC, maybe the Grizzlies. No, the Cavs. Sorry.
Cavs.
Celtics were the favorite, then OKC, then the Cavs, and then I think it was the Nuggets. So I'm not sure where they sit now, but I don't know. Mark my words. I think the Golden State Warriors are really, really sneaky to come out of the West. I think we're doing a lot of talking about OKC and the Lakers on the come up, and does Denver still have a chance? But we are forgetting that Steph Curry still exists. Draymond Green, they've done it before. They have the experience. Now they've added Jimmy Butler, who is exceptional in the playoffs. I would not want to meet that team in the playoffs.
Celtics, Thunder, Cavs. Celtics are your heavy. Well, them and the Thunder both. Heavy favorites 170 and 190 plus 170 plus 190. Then you big gap. Cavaliers are plus 700, so 7-1. Nuggets 14-1. Lakers now right behind them at 16-1. Knicks 22-1. The Warriors are 25-1 right now to win it all.
Out of the West, what are they? Are they maybe worse than what I grabbed it at?
Oh, this is dumb. It's giving me the finals matchups. Let's just.
Oh yeah,
I've got it. Conference.
Yeah, what is their conference to come out of the West?
To come out of the West, OKC is number 1. Nuggets, Warriors are down to 1,200. So if you got it at 17, 12-1 now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know. That's a sneaky one to me. It reminds me of even this year with the Super Bowl. I felt like we did not talk nearly enough about how good the Eagles were, and then before you knew it, they were winning a Super Bowl. So I don't know. I think that the Warriors are not a team to overlook or underestimate at all. Not saying they're going to win it all, but the West, again, I truly believe the West is anybody's game. Even still, with OKC being 10 and a half games ahead of everybody else, I still think it's up for grabs.
And that's going to make it a fun
talent.
It's going to make it a really fun playoffs.
Or terrifying.
It depends on your perspective.
Depends on which team you're rooting for.
Right.
I think as a Nuggets fan, it's a little terrifying, but nonetheless, this has been a Guerrilla Sports Off Court. Any final thoughts from you, BK? Obviously, we'll keep everybody covered on all things Denver Nuggets this week. They're back at home Wednesday and then Friday.
Yeah, they got the Kings and the Suns, some winnable games in there.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the Kings playing better than the Suns have of late. Maybe I'll go down there and see if I can pick KD's brain and see if he'd like to come to Denver.
Ooh, I would love that. And then we've got the back-to-back OKC Sunday and Monday. That will be definitely interesting. The MVPs, the front runners for MVP going head to head. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we will keep you guys posted all week long on all things NBA conversations, as well as the Denver Nuggets, who play 2 home games this week. And then, of course, head to OKC for back-to-back games on Sunday and Monday. So we will keep you covered here at Guerrilla Sports on all things basketball. I'm Liv Moods. That's Brandon Cristal. And this is presented by Trusted American Mortgage. You can head to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you save some money, getting you a better interest rate, lowering your monthly payments. Shout out to our friends over at Trusted American, and we will see you guys very soon.